Is it recording? Cool. So I'm not sure if you're up to date with the Settings UX initiative, and I think I mentioned this before, I hope, so briefly.
Yeah, I read through it
Yeah, so up until recently, or what we have now is that Settings doesn't really belong to any stage group. That might change, but so far we have settings problems that no one owns, and because of that, no one prioritizes. That was the main reason why Nadia started collecting UX issues related to UX issues related to settings. And I went ahead and created this epic, and I'm having conversations with designers from, I'll try to go over all stage groups, but just to have a conversation, try to understand how is settings in your stage group, or are the current issues that you have, or challenges in the past, or future plans, so that we can try to align, first off, have a baseline for, these are the current problems, other than knowing issues that we have on GitLab, but also have a starting point for conversations on where do we want to move forward. Because we had in the past also some research, but ideally we want to solve the problems for everyone. So that's pretty much it. I'm taking notes here, by the way. I'm gonna send this to you.
No, that's totally fair, and I think that's the same reading that I have of this equation. That settings are super important, but no one owns, because no one owns settings. Then all the issues that we have with them are always, I don't think they are ignored, but I think they are just not acknowledged in a way that they can be addressed, because like many of the issues that we have to do a lot with the structure of the settings and finding things, discoverability, like the navigability of the settings itself, it's not ideal.
Yeah.
I mean, my particular group, so like for testing, no one's an interesting one, because like we don't have a lot of things going on settings. We have a couple of things that happen that need to be set up on settings, especially when you want to kind of like create, when you want to create coverage badges. There's something that you got to go and do in settings. I think that's about it. Perhaps there's something else. But for Runner, it's quite interesting, because Runner actually, like, everything that is Runner bubbles up through the settings. That's the only thing that we have right now on Runner when it comes to the UX. And we actually have been doing a couple of things there, so like we have two things coming up. There are MRs for these that are getting merged soon. One is that we are adding a new setting that it's very important for customers, which is disabling shared runners at the group level. I think the other one is, adding the instructions for installing a runner inside the settings instead of leaving the UI and going to the documentation and just basically, getting lost there. So like we're gonna provide a better flow for people to understand how to install a runner. But just in general, like our UX, particularly when it comes to the runner settings, is pretty bad. I have a couple of proposals on how to improve that. We are gonna do a lot of those things. We have plans for that. However, one kind of interesting idea that we have been bouncing around is that at the end of the day, we might like completely unbundle the runner settings and just keep like very light things there, and then kind of like promote runners to be a more first-class citizen, right? Because they are right now like you want to see your runners, you need to go to your settings, and then you see a list of your available runners, that the ones activated for that project, or like the short runners that are available for that project. You see them under the settings. Of course, that hurts the discoverability of certain concepts of runner, like things like, like disabling runners for projects, or, pausing runners so they don't accept new jobs, protecting runners so they only trigger pipelines from protected branches, running and tag jobs. That's another thing. Locking runners to one particular project. All those things are super important in Runner, and they all happen in settings, and they are very hidden. Which, I mean, it's okay. People eventually figure it out, but it's not ideal. So one thing that we have been thinking is, okay, let's basically break apart the important things and then put those things under CI/CD, perhaps in a completely new tab under CI/CD, a new page, and then something else that we have been thinking is like maybe we end up combining jobs and runners, because at the end of the day they are related. Your runners are the ones that are picking the jobs, right? So like there's like this opportunity of combining those two things. I mean, I'm exploring those options. Either way, the problem is that because we throw everything on runner settings, then there's like this mess, like we don't know what's a setting and what's not a setting, like, so even the heuristics of what's a setting, I don't think they're clearly defined. And so that's one problem that I see, and it happens across many things, like it's either management or settings, but it's not, it's definitely operating as both, and that's not good, and I see that in other things like pages also has a little bit of that,
Yeah.
you're going to configure your pages there, but sometimes it gives you the feeling that you might want to configure your pages somewhere else, like, I don't know, that's another thing. So overall, I feel that it's super important to address these. I can tell you, like, from my experience with Runner, that what likely is going to happen is that we are going to make our runner settings more light, and then we're going to move things out of that and create a new area for those things.
Okay.
One problem though is that during that thought process, we have also thought about, like, hey, what if we keep these settings outside of the settings? I don't know if that makes sense, because many of those things are kind of like quite important, like when you are like dealing with your runners, they are more like management features, not so much like a setting, And when I think of settings, I'm thinking about like uh, a set of default values that are used to operate that feature, But sometimes many of these things are go beyond that. Sometimes this is things that you're actively changing, Like pausing a runner is definitely something that you might do a lot, because you might be like giving maintenance to that runner and you want to basically like update it or something, then like you go to settings and then you pause the runner, That doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel right to me that you have to go to settings. I think that we're just complaining too many things there. So that's one thing. I think the other thing is, I think you mentioned that on the issue, but just like the hierarchy in general, it seems so weird, like CI/CD kind of like gets everything that is CI/CD, but I mean that's a fair one. But like general, for instance, that one has like merge requests, merge request approvals, and it almost gives you the feeling that that should go under repository. I don't know why. Like I feel that it shouldn't like be there in general. And I think these are all decisions that were made way in the past. Like they precede us, and then they just like live there, and we gotta deal with them, because that's how they are. So yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. It's definitely not ideal right now. There's many issues.
So when you talk about decoupling settings from the usual configuration to bundle it with the runners, I'm curious to hear if you have already validated some of these workflows, or if you have any insights, or just that we can also share and help us to influence how we're going to make updates to the information architecture of settings.
Yeah, we did a problem validation for frictionless runners. Like that's like a huge initiative that we have about like making runners easier for people. Yeah, we saw a lot of. I might have those on Dovetail. I think I can share those with you later.
Yes, please share these links with me.
Yeah, yeah, I'll put them on the issue. But overall, the idea, I think the insight is that people, yeah, people don't like neglect the fact that there's settings, you know, like they just like think about these. They get more confused with the fact that things live in settings than with the fact that they and with the idea that they should probably be operating this from another place. You know, like they have that preconception that like if they want to deal with runners, like they should be like more first class citizen type of things. You know, and if that's the case, then they shouldn't live in settings. You know, because that's one problem. So I think the insight that we found on that problem validation is like, okay, first of all, don't put everything there. You know, it doesn't make sense. And then there's a bunch of things like people don't understand that you can actually go there and, for instance, edit a runner. I think that's people don't get that. I think they just get the idea that because many of these things can be operated from the CLI anyway. So like that's one thing, you know, like people are like, no, I'm just gonna do this from the CLI.
Yeah, that was my my follow-up questions, because in release management and in progressive delivery as well, we have a lot of configuration that happens in both CI, the CI file,
Yeah,
demo, and the UI.
yeah.
So I'm also curious to hear how do you handle, or if you handle this type of setup right now in this way, and if you encountered any issues or if you have any good things to share
Yeah,
about the
yeah,
type of configuration.
yeah, totally. That's a great question because we actually do have problems with that. So right now, when you want to install a runner, you have to go to settings. So that's the first thing. You always have to go to settings, and then there you're gonna see instructions on how to install a runner, and the instructions give you the URL for the instance, and they give you the registration token for the instance. And you need those two values when you're going to register a runner. So you always have to go to settings. Now, one problem that we have seen is that people do that and then they forget to like there's a process in which you install the runner. You need to do all these things on your machine, and then you need to register the runner. People forget to do the registration many times, so they think it's already there, you know. But like they forget that they forget that there's a process in which they need to bind the runner to the instance. And I think one big problem with that is that they live in settings. Like people are never gonna check that in their usual workflows. You know, that's why we have been thinking about the idea of like if we put this on jobs, which is likely an area where people are seeing a lot, we could create like a placeholder for recently. I mean, that's just like a crazy idea that we have right now. But like, if you have a placeholder for your runner, then you know that the runner never got registered and he never kind of like contacted the instance, you know. But that only works if it's in a place where you can check it, you know. You're like actively seeing it, you know. So that's one problem that we see. Like, um,
Yeah, that's another thing we've also been discussing about the discoverability of settings in general, right? Not even
yeah,
where settings live, if it should live in the menu section, in the like a high level or in the settings page, but the discoverability of settings, and also the lack of contextualization when you are working on a process, but you need a second, a third, a fourth step, right? And I think that's in general that's a GitLab problem where we don't give users the hints that to proceed, they need to do whatever.
right. There's another one that I have heard a lot, personal experience too, which is sometimes you wanna do something. Like let's say you wanna let me think about a good one. You wanna uh, I'm gonna go to CI/CD and okay, let's say you wanna deploy add a deploy freeze, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you don't know where's that, right? Like you're new to GitLab, so like your job to be done is to add a deploy freeze, right? So now what? So like what people will do is that they go on Google,
Yeah.
deploy freeze GitLab, right? And then like the documentation shows up, and the documentation, like, it's good, it's very thorough. But one problem that I always see, and I think I have heard this from a couple of people, is that when you go through the documentation, it always takes some time to find exactly where's the setting. Like it's very hidden somewhere in the documentation, which is something that I was thinking about opening an issue and proposing to the documentation team. Like every time that it's about a setting, it should have like a big thing at the top telling you where to find it. I think that has to do a lot with the discoverability, because like we cannot expect people to, like, that's the only way to find things. Like you go on Google them and you find the documentation, right? So, and I think we don't do like a great job at telling people, okay, like your deploy freezes live under settings, CI/CD, deploy freezes. That's where you add it. That's the only information that most people need. If they need to do something else, then they will figure it out. Almost as like it's so frustrating, because like many of the instructions that you get for settings are already in the settings. We have instructions for runners in the runner settings. So what most people are trying to accomplish is find where to add a runner, or where to get the runner token, or where to get the any of the things that they want to do with runner. So yeah, that's a documentation aspect of the issue, but I think it's a very important one.
That's very interesting because as a user, when I had to install, for example, Auto DevOps in my local instance, it was a nightmare. It designed to do that. And I think I still have to talk to some of the configure designers, but I'm super curious to understand their perspective as well, because they have settings that happen outside of GitLab. So there's the docs, right? Where there's this contextualization within sections in the product, but also different setting pages for things that overlap.
Oh, so right.
It's a very it's very interesting.
Yeah. By the way, that many of the things that happen with Runner also happen completely outside of even like the boundaries of what GitLab is. Sometimes you gotta like work with your cloud provider, which is like AWS or Google Cloud or Azure, or whatever, and like once it's outside of our realm, it also becomes way harder. I mean, like there gotta be also good ways for us to facilitate that, because it's just because it lives outside of our realm doesn't mean that we cannot. I don't think we should be like ignore the fact that we will help our users to navigate like the complex use cases that they have with external services. One of those being like, how do I install a runner in a remote machine? Which GitLab doesn't control at all, at least from the beginning. So I mean, that's another one. I think sometimes people like get confused with those things as well. Is this something that I gotta set up on GitLab, or is this something that I gotta set up on my machine? Like it's two completely different animals. Which I know that there's I think it was Maria, she's the one working on yeah, I think it's Maria. She's the one working on the GitLab agent, which it's supposedly gonna fix a lot of these problems. It's like this GitLab agent that you install on like your machine, and it handles many of these settings for you, like, and it does a lot of like the orchestration between GitLab and your machine. But still, I like, until we get there, I think there's a lot of holes, like gaps in the experience like you're interacting with. I mean, this is especially important for self-hosted instances, right? Like where you install GitLab and you're supposed to, like live with GitLab and make sure that GitLab works. Like we don't control the machine, so like we are somehow responsible for the machine, but we not to the point that we can like tell them like what's broken with the machine, So.
Okay. Do you have any work? Because you mentioned, I think the items that you mentioned about like decoupling, the runner settings, they're for the future, right? Or are you already
Oh no,
implementing?
I have issues. I have issues open with actual proposals and things. This very simplification of things. I'll add those to the issue as well. That it's mostly it's very MVC, right? Like very iterative, like things that I'm suggesting are basically okay. Let's make these way simpler. Like let's like improve the visual aspect of these settings. Let's make it more clear. Let's bubble up better state what's going on. Like that, it's very important for runner because in runner sometimes like for the things that we're doing, like let's say you open settings, runner settings in a project. Sometimes you need the context of what are the settings at the group level,
Yeah.
and just that UX is a little bit complex because you gotta tell the customer like, hey, you cannot enable share runners because share runners are disabled at the group level, and your group admin doesn't allow you to turn them on at the project level. So how do you explain that in your settings in a way that it's not a whole mess, because it can become very verbose and it can. And by the way, you need to have that context. It's like, oh, I didn't know that like groups can disable group runners, So like that's another thing.
Yeah, that's another point. I'm also working on the release group releases, so settings and configuration of release at the group level, and it's the same. It's the same challenge. Like, how can you tell users that the project release works the way it does because of the group release configuration?
Group setting,
If they don't have context or access to these settings, or they didn't even know that things were enabled or disabled. Totally. Or whatever. So yeah.
And honestly, we need to do a good job at that. It's kind of like unreasonable to expect that this is gonna be communicated somehow between the owner of the group and like the users of the project. That doesn't make sense, right? Like it's things that you really gotta be very explicit about and tell them why they cannot use certain features or why they cannot enable certain settings.
Yeah, I got you. That's a very interesting topic.
Yeah.
I think every designer is it's excited to talk about settings because we all have
I think I just have given you like a bunch of problems and no solutions, and I apologize for that. But I'm like also I'm also trying to find solutions,
No, but I'm here in a way to try to understand these problems and try to summarize or communicate them, because I'm gonna just go over this. Hold on a second.
Sure.
Because I just wanted to tell you the themes that we have identified so far, like high-level themes for settings.
Okay.
So let me find it here, because I have here. So this is based on the issues that 550 issues. We have 550 issues for settings, and we have 100, whatever, almost 200 for UX, settings UX. So we have identified the core problems that they live in discoverability of settings. So it's exactly what you were talking about. Global versus items, or like, global settings versus functionality settings mix. I think you also mentioned that. The switch of the flow. So you're doing something here, you have to go somewhere else.
Right.
The overload of options. Okay. And inconsistency in general across settings. So this is more like UI changes. And I think it's also because we don't really have a library or a pattern defined for settings. We have the components, but we don't have how settings should work. Right. So in a way, I'm happy to hear your problems because they meet this.
I think they all fit in those buckets that you just described, like they all, I think, well, I'm glad that you have those buckets described, because it seems that we all perceive the same problems, which makes me, I'm not happy that we have the problems, but I'm like happy that I'm not perceiving the wrong problems,
Mm-hmm. And I think the next steps for me, of course, I'm just gonna collect this information and I'll try to bundle this your insights into these themes. So if you can share with me, Juan, those issues, you can like everything.
Yeah.
Anything you have around this, the items we discussed, let me know.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, no, I'm gonna add all the issues, all the related things to the issue. I just took a note. I'm gonna do that today, and hopefully that helps build a better picture of
yeah,
like how the problem is perceived from different groups.
for sure. And if
Yeah.
there's anything else that you remember, or if you think that it's relevant, just let me know. I'm doing this mostly async,
Okay.
but I'm meeting up. I think hopefully when Dimitri is back to the office, I'm also going to have a conversation with him. But I'm very interested in knowing, like trying to find a common ground for us, because with CI/CD, we're always changing or at least influencing how we do settings in different
Yeah.
ways.
Totally.
And I think that's something we can definitely get better at, like trying to find, you know, the
Yeah. No, I completely agree. I think that if the outcome of this is at least having like a set of standards that we have to use when dealing with settings, I think that will be an excellent outcome. It's not that we need to fix everything right away, but I think just like having like that guidance, like that kind of like framework to like create settings and just don't throw settings, because the way that it feels is like when someone needs a setting is just like put it there. That's basically the job, or which it shouldn't be like that. So I feel that that's an excellent. I'm super happy about the initiative, and I hope that like that's the outcome, because it will be super helpful.
That's awesome. If you have any other question, just let me know. I added this as a note here, as in maybe something that we can add to pajamas. We have regions, we have objects, we have content, but we don't have like patterns, right?
Yeah, for
It'll be
sure.
interesting.
Yeah, that'll be interesting for adding that for sure.
Yeah, I'm gonna add this note for myself to investigate this, or like add initial proposal.
Nice.
Because that's definitely something I miss as a designer. It's like, am I designing this using the right patterns?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because when you do settings, for example, the expand collapse, I know how expand collapse work, and I know how it's explained or how it's usable in isolation, right?
Right.
But in context with a feature or capability, it becomes a bit more complicated.
Totally.
Yeah.
It's it's funny that you bring that particular example, because I have dealt with that example, even with the idea of like, can I put an expand collapse within expand collapse, which seems like a very natural way of hiding complexity, but then it's also kind of like a daunting experience. So I don't know. I mean, like, if you ask me, like, I'm just gonna be blunt. I would love if we will just like revamp like all the issues of all the settings eventually. But I don't think that would be also like ideal for the customers. It would be like too much of a big bang, probably affect their. I mean, there's already. So I think whatever we do, it needs to be like very MVC and whatever. But at least I'm glad that we are acknowledging that there's a problem there.
That's awesome. And I agree with you. We had a discussion yesterday also, because I had another call about settings. And my gut feeling as a designer is that we want to introduce, we don't want to introduce a lot of friction here, because we've seen GitHub, we've seen the design, and changing something that even if it doesn't work, but it's there and it's been there for so long. And I don't think it doesn't matter what role you have as a user in GitLab, you have settings. You're gonna have
absolutely.
So it's something that I agree with you. My initial intention, what's in my head right now, is to really understanding what are the shared problems and the shared opportunities that that we can try to prioritize, and find just a way to design the vision together. But then we build in a way that we can validate it. Right? Yeah. Okay.
Right. Thank you. This is super helpful. I'll put those my context on the issue, and then I look forward to keep collaborating on this.
Awesome. Thank you, Juan. I'm gonna stop the recording.
Yeah.